Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of When Realities Collide. This will be Part 10, Chapter 10. Saturday. Alternate Reality. Izuku spends most of the night staring at the note Deku had given him. He tries to sleep, he really does, but he can just stare at that torn slip of paper and think. He can't rein in the thoughts, the questions, possible answers. He knows so much about his reality double, but he can't for the life of him figure out what went wrong. Even when he does have his eyes shut, all he sees are the sharp strokes of kanji and the wrinkles and folds of balled-up journaling paper. He can imagine himself, no, Deku, writing it out with a steady hand, followed by hurriedly tearing it from the notebook. The note is haunting him. When the morning arrives, rays of sun peeking into the room through the curtains and the sounds of his sensei stumbling from their own room, it's the earliest he'd been awake in this reality, and he desperately wishes he wasn't. His eyes beg to be shut, but his brain just won't turn off. He lays for a while longer, eyes squeezed shut, but sleep not finding him. When he finally decides it's futile to chase something that obviously will not be finding him now, he furiously dry washes his face with his palms, taking comfort in the scratch of cotton fabric and skin-on-skin friction that wakes what little drowsiness he managed. He sighs heavily into the darkness as he lets his arms settle at his sides for a second as he mourns the night and the chance of sleeping before he's pushing himself up. He stumbles up from bed, beelining towards the stack of clothes he'd been gifted by the teachers, pulling on the first sweatshirt he finds in the pile. It's big on him, a size or so too big, but it pulls comfortably over the shirt he'd worn to bed. He finds himself stood in the center of the room after that, hesitating. His gaze drifts to the bedside table where the note that had kept him up all night remains. The teen narrows his gaze on the small, folded paper scrap, a distasteful frown tugging at his lips. He swallows down the hesitance, stepping to the bedside table to grab the folded-up note and stares at it in his hand for just a second, before slipping it into the pocket of his sweatshirt as he turns to the door and heads out the room. He hears the light conversation as he approaches the kitchen, but his attention is on the note, thumbing lightly over the edge of it in his pocket. He knows he should show Aizawa-sensei. The man would want to know. All Might would want to know. And Detective Tsukuuchi. Deku had made contact. They could finally arrest him. They could plan something. Deku has been causing problems for far too long, and it's about time he was put away for everything he's done. He's a villain. But Izuku doesn't think he's dangerous. Well, he is, of course, but not like Shigaraki and the rest of the League. He'd like to say it's because he's Midoriya Izuku, but that's obviously not true. Still, there's something about that figure he'd met that just wasn't bad. Danger sense hadn't gone off, and besides the oddity of the situation, Deku hadn't made a move. Deku had found them when they were vulnerable, Izuku and Eraserhead both. He could have contacted Shigaraki and the League. Izuku's sure he's probably on their radar at this point. What's better than one Deku? Two Dekus. And Eraserhead is a pro hero that will definitely give the League trouble if given the chance. They'd seen him in action. Izuku remembers how interested in Aizawa-sensei Shigaraki was during that fight at the USJ. Deku could have swiftly and easily reported back, turned them into the League, gotten them captured or even killed. It seems in character for him, according to everything everyone had been telling him about his doppelganger. It would have been easy. And quick. Assuming Deku had seen them when they hadn't seen him, that he'd had the time to scribble out a note and come up with a clever, unassuming way to pass it to him without causing suspicion to the observant pro-hero. There definitely would have been time to bring the League in for an ambush. With the Portal Void villain's quirk, they could have been there in seconds, waiting and watching for the perfect time to take them out. Eraserhead could put up a fight, but worrying about the entire League at once? Dealing with a group of villains who knows his quirk activation tell? His weaknesses? Even he's not that good. Deku could have done so much damage without lifting a finger, but he hadn't. He'd made contact, harmlessly, forced a note into Izuku's hand discreetly, and had taken off before either Izuku or his sensei figured him out. It had been fluent and slick, like Deku had planned it. It could be a trap, of course. But even as he thumbs along the note, danger sense remains dormant. And it's a pretty stupid trap anyways, if that's what the League had planned. Deku has no assurance that Izuku isn't coming in guns blazing with dozens of pro-heroes. He's a wanted villain. And Izuku is a heroic student. He should be suspicious of Izuku, just like Izuku is suspicious of him. If they're the same person, he'd know better than to just believe everything will be fine and dandy when attempting something like this. He'd reached out to Izuku, taking the chance to do it right under Eraserhead's nose, but he can't be sure Izuku himself isn't planning something too. At any rate, they should both be prepared for an ambush. They'd both be idiots to not involve their own sides. If what everyone says about Deku is true, he's smart. And this doesn't seem like a half-baked plan that Shigaraki could have come up with. Thought had gone into this. Waiting until now is more dangerous than ambushing them at the beach would have been. Deku has a motive, and it doesn't have anything to do with Shigaraki. It feels legit. Midoriya. Izuku startles, fist tightening around the paper in his pocket. He jerks his attention up to his sensei, where the man is watching him with a concerned furrowed brow. You okay? Huh? Izuku blinks owlishly before focusing his attention on his surroundings. Sensei is sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, eyes narrowed and scrutinizing, and Yamada-sensei is turned away from the stovetop, spatula in hand as he also watches Izuku in concern. Izuku blinks owlishly, thoughtful, frown deepening. He doesn't know when he made it to the kitchen. Izuku realizes after another long second that they look so worried because he's just standing in the doorway of their kitchen. He had been so lost in thought that he wouldn't be surprised he had that absent look in his eyes, the look he always has when he draws away from the world and just thinks. It's a bad habit. How long had he just been stood in the doorway? How long had they been watching? Waiting? Oh, he breathes out. Tugging his hand from his pouch pocket to rub at the back of his neck in embarrassment, he flashes them, each a disarming half-smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired. You look it, listener, Present Mike chimes in as he turns towards his sizzling pan. Rough night? Couldn't sleep, Izuku offers with a shrug as he finally moves into the room, settling at the table with his sensei. Aizawa-sensei is still quiet, studying him as he settles at the table. Izuku pretends not to notice. You're up awfully early, the underground hero muses behind his mug of coffee. Any particular reason? Were you planning on going for a run this morning? Izuku shakes his head wordlessly. He hadn't even thought about a morning run. Frankly, it's the furthest thing from his mind right now. He can get back onto his workout schedule when he's home in his own reality, and he's not debating what to do with Deku. The note in his pocket feels heavier at the thought. He bites at the inside of his cheek, tugging his other hand out of his pocket. He laces his fingers together and sets his hands on the table, turning his gaze down to the edge of the table. Should he tell them? Of course he should. That's a no-brainer. They're pro-heroes, they're his teachers where he's from. He trusts them, both in his own reality and here as well. This is bigger than him. Deku is dangerous. Izuku shouldn't go into this blindly, and there's no trusting someone working with the League. He'd be an idiot to not tell Sensei. But a plate is set in front of him, and Izuku, embarrassingly enough, startles. He draws his hands back into his chest, like the plate will snap out and bite at his fingers, and whips his attention to Present Mike, who blinks, looking just as startled as Izuku feels. The man brushes off the surprise first, offering a sheepish smile as he gestures to the plate. Bacon and eggs, he says in cheery explanation. Hope you don't mind a simple American breakfast, listener. Thank you, Izuku nods, dragging his palms down his cheeks in an attempt to stir himself from his thoughts. He can't be focused on that now, not when he's already under observation. He can't be distracted to the point it's worrying those around him. He doesn't want them worried. He doesn't want them suspicious. If they started asking questions, serious, pointed questions, Izuku doesn't know if he'd be able to lie right to their faces. He has a deep respect for all his teachers. He picks his chopsticks up and offers a lopsided smile to the two men watching him. Present Mike had joined them at the table now, brow furrowed and eyes darting subtly between Izuku and Aizawa-sensei. His senseis exchange a glance before each picking up their own chopsticks and starting to eat. Izuku follows suit, unable to stop his shoulders from hunching inwards. He appreciates them at least acting like he's not being weird and distant, even if it's just for right now. His thoughts keep circling back to the note sitting heavy in his pocket, back to Deku and all the questions he has. What had happened? There's no way for him to get an answer without actually hearing it from Deku. Only Deku would be able to tell him that. He craves answers. He can't just accept that he's some sort of monster here, without knowing what went wrong. Okay, Izuku jerks his attention up at the sound of Sensei's voice. "What's up with you?" The man is watching him, hands interlaced together, with his chin settled on the bridge of his fingers. His elbows support his head, and his eyes are narrowed calculatingly on Izuku. Present Mike has leaned back in his chair, lip caught between his teeth as he watches Izuku too. Their plates, he realizes, are empty, whereas his is hardly touched. He'd gotten lost in his thoughts again. He really is awful at this. "I have a headache," Izuku croaks out before he can really think better of it, voice hoarse and lie tasting acidic. They've been so kind to him, and here he is lying to them. "I'm just very tired, I guess. Didn't really sleep, and now I have a headache." "You should have told me." Sensei shakes his head, standing up to find the ibuprofen bottle. "Did you want to go to classes today, or would you like to stay here?" "I can't stay here with you today. The class is doing some joint work with 1B, and Vlad wouldn't know how to handle my class. You should be perfectly safe up here, though, if that's what you'd like to do." "I'd like to sleep," Izuku whispers, staring down at the table just so the man can't read his expression and be able to tell he's lying through his teeth. "Well, I suppose that proves that you're definitely unwell," the man huffs out, setting the pill bottle on the table beside Izuku's plate. A glass of water settled on the other side of the plate, and when Izuku glances over, Present Mike offers a soft smile before turning and disappearing down the hall. "Anything weird about the headache?" "No danger sense," Izuku mutters, the first honest thing he said this morning. His chest tightens guiltily as that sinks in, and he avoids looking at either teacher. "And it's not a migraine, just a lack of sleep thing, I think. I'm fine." "No reason to involve Recovery Girl, then." The man nods to himself. "How's your hand? I completely forgot about your scheduled visit to the infirmary yesterday, what with everything else going on. Any symptoms of infection?" Not to mention, Izuku looks down at his bandaged hand. He'd almost forgotten about it. It's no better or worse, really. Maybe it hurts a bit more after falling on it yesterday, but it's not infected or anything. "It's okay." Sensei studies him, eyes narrowed before he seems to accept the answer. "I'll bring you down there after school today, if you're up for it. She'll want to see you, and she can change the bandages then. You take today to rest up. I know you don't like the nurse's office, but it's a necessary evil." Izuku nods sheepishly, leaning on his elbow, uninjured hand supporting his head. His bandaged hand slips into the pocket, fiddling with the note again. If the man notices, he doesn't mention it. Aizawa-sensei takes his silence as an answer, nodding to himself as he turns wordlessly and disappears down the hallway just as Present Mike had. A quick glance at the clock shows it's about the time Izuku knows the teachers head into school and prepare for the day. He's seen Aizawa-sensei in his own reality, leaving around this time when he's coming back from his morning run. Izuku stares down at the pill bottle in front of him, that guilt swirling in his chest, making him feel sick. He supposes he deserves it for lying about being sick. If he wants to get answers, he has to do this alone. Izuku doesn't know Deku, but he does know himself. Should this really be Deku reaching out and not a trap, which if it was, he could use his quirk, which they don't know about, like his own league back home does, to escape. Heroes showing up on scene would shatter the mutual trust they'd each begrudgingly offered up. Deku reaching out, and Izuku entertaining the request. He knows he'd close himself off completely if he was in Deku's shoes, and someone brought in an unknown factor, such as a hero, Aizawa-sensei especially. If he wants to get to the bottom of this, it means doing it alone. Deku hasn't reached out to anyone else, or he'd already be behind bars. He's got an agenda, and Izuku wants to know why he's doing this. He wants answers, and that means somehow managing to separate himself from his senseis and doing it without raising suspicion. Izuku hears footsteps approaching, so he lifts the glass of water to his lips, sipping at it so it looks like he'd taken some ibuprofen. He feels awful as he does so, the water tasting almost acidic as it settles in his stomach. He nurses the glass to his chest as Sensei appears. "I doubt anything will happen, but if something does, Bakugo is still on house arrest," Sensei explains easily. "He'll be in the dorms with you if you need him. He can contact me if necessary. There's also a landline that has the principal, the main office, the nurse's office, and mine and Hizashi's personal numbers on speed dial if you urgently need something." Izuku glances up to where the man gestures, spotting said landline phone. He knows there's a similar landline downstairs in the common area of the dorms, too. It's got the nurse's office, Aizawa-sensei's number, and various other emergency sort of numbers on speed dial as well. They hadn't had to use it yet in his reality, but it is nice to know they have a way to contact help, even if something goes wrong with their internet or cell service. Okay, Izuku nods. Sensei glances at the clock on the wall, frowning to himself before lulling his attention in the direction he's just come and loudly speaking. Hizashi, we'll be late for the staff meeting if you don't hurry up. Izuku hears the sound of hurried footsteps and something that sounds suspiciously like a string of curse words in English. He bows his head, biting back a smile as Present Mike appears next to Sensei, tugging on his leather jacket while pushing up stray blonde hairs. I'm ready. Let's go. I do not want Nezu being all passive-aggressive with us because we're late. Sensei shakes his head as the other man hurries past them to the door, leading out to the hallway. You rest up, Sensei tells him as he turns to follow Mike. Izuku waves the man off, bowing his head as he listens to both teachers tugging their shoes on, arguing lightly about something under their breaths. He listens to the door open and then close before silence settles in the apartment. Izuku waits a couple minutes, just to be sure, before finally pushing himself up. He tidies up after himself, washes the dishes from breakfast, and finishes off the water Present Mike had gotten him. Then disappears into the guest room to change his clothes. He holds the note in his hand when he's finally dressed, nose crunching up as he hesitates. Izuku nods to himself. He can't push this off. His days here are obscurely numbered, and he knows he'll never forgive himself if he goes home without figuring this out. He wants answers, and if Deku is willing to give him those answers, he's going to at least try to meet the villain halfway. No matter what sort of plan Deku has in motion. Izuku leaves the guest room and beelines towards the front door. It's only as he's tugging on his shoes that he decides maybe he is an idiot. Finding Kacchan isn't as hard as he thought it might have been. It turns out his childhood friend is in the kitchen. There are stacks of freshly washed dishes piled on the counter waiting to be put away, and Katsuki holds a broom, knuckles bone white as he works. He grumbles to himself as he sweeps under the dining table, not instantly noticing Izuku. Kacchan, Izuku calls out, ignoring the need to snicker as the blonde shoots up in surprise, eyes narrowing sharply on Izuku in question. I need your help. What the hell are you doing sneaking around down here? The blonde snaps back in reply. You're supposed to be with Sensei, nerd. Did all my trying to beat the shit out of you yesterday teach you nothing? Hey, he apologized for that, Izuku huffs, crossing his arms over his chest. And he was just trying to protect the school. You grabbed me by my shirt and threatened to hurt me if I did anything to the 1A students when we first met. And, you know what? This isn't what I'm here to talk to you about. I need your help. Katsuki eyes him, leaning against the broom, bending the bristles into the floor. With what? I need to get off campus, Izuku tells his childhood friend, making sure his expression remains entirely serious. This is important, Kacchan. Seriously, I need to go. So talk to Sensei and get him to bring you off campus. The blonde snorts out, seemingly done with this conversation, as he resumes his sweeping, uninterestedly. I don't know what you expect me to do for you, in case you forgot I'm on house arrest. Do you want me expelled or something, because you already had your chance for that? I can't go to Sensei. And why the fuck not? Kacchan demands, glaring up from his sweeping. When he catches Izuku's face, though, the hostility in his expression dims as uncertainty takes over. Izuku, what did you do? Izuku hesitates before he reaches into his pocket and pulls out the note. If anyone would be able to see what he sees, it would be Kacchan. Izuku steps forward, holding the small, folded paper out to his childhood friend. He remains perfectly still, hand outstretched, as Kacchan scrutinizes the paper suspiciously before he shifts so the broom is leaned against his collarbone and his hands are free. The ashen-haired teen takes the paper into his hands, and Izuku's hands settle at his side when the paper is no longer within his grasp, feeling almost exposed as Kacchan handles the note. Izuku is quiet as Kacchan unfolds it, and only when his friend's eyes are scanning over the words on the paper does he finally speak again. It's not what I've done. It's what I'm going to do. Kacchan's eyes lift from the paper, features pinched in annoyance and confusion. What the hell kind of note is this? He asks dryly, eyes flicking back down as he loudly reads out what the note says. Can someone without a quirk become a hero like you? What the hell are you writing notes to yourself for, nerd? You're already a hero, for God's sake. Need your ego stroked or some shit. Or is this some kind of fucking guilt trip? I already told you I was sorry, so what kind of bullshit is this? I didn't write that, Kacchan, Izuku whispers, holding the blonde's gaze sharply. For a long second, neither boy moves. The silence settling around them is tense. Kacchan stares at Izuku, eyes wide and surprised and thoughtful. And Izuku just waits for his friend to come to the right conclusion. He contacted you, Kacchan states emotionlessly. There's an edge of dread in his tone, eyes almost unseeing. He's watching Izuku, but it almost feels like the other's looking right through him. He'd pieced it together almost instantly, but Izuku wasn't surprised by that. Izuku knows his own writing, had known who he was in contact with the second he'd read over the kanji, and Kacchan has been looking at the same formal kanji for as long as he has. Izuku knows his own writing penmanship hasn't changed since early middle school. And you're seriously considering this? The blonde's eyes flick between Izuku and the note he now has scrunched between shaking fingers. He sucks in a breath through his nose, sharp eyes lasering in on Izuku. Deku reached out to you. You're going to... Are you a fucking moron, Izuku? He's a goddamn villain. He's still me, Izuku snaps back, marching forwards to snatch the note back from Katsuki. He thumbs over the date, today, and the time, just a couple hours from now, scrawled at the top of the note before shoving it back into his pocket. Look, I know you don't like this, but I need to go, Kacchan. I need to solve this. I need your help. I am not helping you get yourself killed, the blonde roars. Do you have any idea how stupid this is? Deku kills people. He has hurt people. He hurt Sensei. He's a bad guy, Izuku. You need to tell Sensei. You need to tell the fucking police or even All Might, for God's sake. You don't know that, Izuku growls back, puffing out his chest and stepping closer to Kacchan. We don't know why he's doing this. We don't know why he and I are different when nothing so far is different. Until I hear it from him, I can't believe this. Is there even any proof Deku's done all this, or just accusations from villains? No one's even seen him until yesterday. That bastard kidnapped me. And you told him to kill himself, Izuku snaps before he can think better of it. It really is a dirty argument, but he just can't stop himself. Kacchan falls into a stunned silence, staring at Izuku with a glare that teeters between annoyance and hesitance. It's a familiar, yet odd expression to see on his childhood friend's face. Look. Izuku stares hard at the ground, rubbing his palms against his face before pushing them up through his curls, leaving green locks stood on ends. He tries reining in the flurry of emotions catching in his voice as he continues. Something doesn't add up here. Something went wrong between me meeting All Might and you getting attacked by the sludge villain. Deku was supposed to be there, but he wasn't. Something happened, Kacchan, something different. The ashen-haired boy is silent before him, brooding. His arms are crossed tightly over his chest, and his jaws set with tension. He scans Izuku up and down, but something in his gaze softens when his eyes catch Izuku's own. Still, he doesn't speak. The green-haired teen sucks in a breath, voice dropping to a whisper. If you've ever regretted what you said to us, to him, then help me now. I don't know what happened, but he's reaching out. He's reaching out to me. If you ever want the chance to apologize to him for being an asshole, for what you've said and done, then help me. Help me help him. How? Kacchan's voice is hardly that of a whisper, eyes glaring into Izuku's soul. Do you even know where you're going? What that note means? Of course I do. I asked that question to someone and Deku did too. I know exactly where he wants to go, just from that. It's honestly really clever, since no one else but me would know what that means, but that's beside the point. I need to leave school grounds, Izuku says, matching Kacchan's closed-off body language. I know where he wants me to go, and I can get there myself. I need to go without raising suspicion, without the teachers realizing. So use your ID card, Kacchan huffs out pointedly. I know you have one. Looked pretty official to me. We tried it already, Izuku groans out, ruffling his fingers through his own curls. Trust me, if that worked, I would have just left. You think I want you involved in this? I don't want this to hurt you, but the system doesn't register mine as an active student number. I need you. Or your ID, at least. I know where I'm going once I'm off school grounds. I just need a way out. Kacchan is silent, studying Izuku with narrowed eyes. This is so fucking stupid. You know Deku's insane, right? Kacchan huffs out finally, slipping his hand into his pocket, as his eyes narrow on Izuku even sharper, like a silent warning or something. He's a fucking psycho to be working with the League. They're all fucking nuts. He's not who I know anymore. He's not who you think he is. He's not like you, Izuku. You're not the same person anymore. He's smart, and he works with the villains. Despite Katsuki's words, he does pull out his wallet, then proceeds to tug out his UAID card. He holds the card out while shoving his wallet back into his pocket. Sensei's going to beat my ass when he finds out. I'm sure this is grounds for expulsion, Izuku. My ass is on the line for you to try to play buddy-buddy with one of the current most wanted villains of Japan. I'll cover for you, Izuku promises, grabbing a hold of the card and frowning when Katsuki doesn't immediately release his own grip. If Sensei or anyone else asks, I stole this from you. I'll take the blame, I promise. As soon as I'm past the gates, there's nothing they can do. Deku wouldn't have reached out if he didn't want to talk to me. I need to know. Kachan grits his teeth, glaring hard at the ID card before finally releasing his hold. He tucks one hand back into his pocket and picks the broom up from where it had been leaning against his collarbone. He watches, glaring, as Izuku tucks the ID card into his sweatshirt pocket. You really are a goddamn idiot, Izuku. I know, Izuku snorts out, managing a light smile. I think it's part of my charm, though. Kachan snorts out something that borders on unamusement and exasperation, shaking his head. Izuku hesitates as Kachan picks the broom back up, hands tightening around the wood. Izuku lets out a deep exhale through his nose, that lingering feeling of guilt deepening as he looks at his childhood friend. What? The ashen-haired boy drawls, sharp eyes scanning Izuku. Second-guessing yourself already? It's not too late to not be a goddamn suicidal idiot. No, it's not that. Izuku bows his head apologetically, trying to swallow down the guilt. I'm just really sorry that I'm forcing you into this. I know you're putting a lot on the line to help. Shut up. Listen. I was ready to go down when Sensei learned of our past, the blonde snaps, gently jabbing Izuku's shoulder with the handle of the broom. And I'm ready to go down for this. I owe Deku this, at least. If I can't help him, what kind of lousy hero will I be anyways? And maybe you're right. Maybe I'll be able to apologize to him sometime, too. He deserves my apology. Your Katsuki still needs to get his head out of his fucking ass. He'll grow up eventually, Izuku insisted, sold on the idea after seeing the maturity of this Bakugo Katsuki. It's possible, at least. His own just hasn't come to the same conclusion just yet, but he's hopeful he will. We are on decent terms, though. Kachan snorts a disbelieving laugh once again, but doesn't add anything else. Izuku nods to himself, turning away. It feels like a natural place for the conversation to end, and for him to take his leave. It's not like Kachan is a sentimental type that would want to send him off with a heartfelt goodbye. Kachan may be nicer in this reality, but he's still Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku just about makes it to the Genkin when... Izuku! Izuku pauses in place, but doesn't look back at his childhood friend. Just... don't let that fucker kill you, all right? He works with the League. Remember that. They don't make headlines for nothing. Izuku made his way through town, silently glad nothing glaring has changed. His hands are buried in his pockets, and presses the meat of his thumb into the dull edge of Kachan's ID card. It's blunt, but the more pressure he uses, the more grounding the dull sting gets. His escape had gone perfectly, Kachan's card unlocking the gates so Izuku could slip out. He knows there will probably be a notice or something sent to the principal, saying that a student left, and that Sensei will no doubt hear about Kachan supposedly leaving campus as well. But he is safe in the dorms still, so he hopes nothing bad comes to Kachan. Not when this is all Izuku's stupid idea. The note from Deku brushes along his knuckles as he walks, but for the most part, he tries to keep his mind off of it. If he thinks too hard about Deku, he'll start to consider how much of a bad idea this is. He knows it is, but he also knows that out of everyone Deku could have reached out to, he's the one who's the most unbiased towards the situation, whereas everyone else has been watching everything Deku's done. If anyone could understand Deku, Izuku thinks it would be himself, and he doesn't want to risk the pros messing this up. He arrives at the train station a lot faster now than he had yesterday when he and Aizawa-sensei had stepped out. It's calming to know what to expect, knowing things hadn't changed much between realities. Izuku silently thanks the universe for free student transportation on public services and swipes Kachan's card solely out of convenience. At this time of day, in the middle of the week, it's a very quiet ride. He rides the sky train deeper into Musutafu, hands clenching into fists where they're buried in his pockets. He stares out the window across from where he's sitting, absently keeping track of where he's going and the landmarks and buildings he knows they're going to pass on the journey. When he reaches his destination, Izuku is quick to exit the train. He settles into the walk ahead of him, trailing along familiar roads. It is his childhood town, after all. He knows his way around. He finds himself en route toward the bridge that had been both his emotional breaking point as well as the start of his heroics life, the place that had started everything for him. He pauses at the mouth of the bridge, hesitating as fear ropes around his heart. He'd avoided this place since that day. He'd started taking the longer route home and steered clear of the bridge entirely as he finished off junior high. Even now, he can't seem to force himself under where he'd almost died. The phantom feeling of suffocation settles in his lungs, and the grimy scent of sewage and stale, murky water catches in his nose. This is where he would have died, if it hadn't been for All Might. Izuku shakes his head, clearing his thoughts as he turns on his heels and leaves the bridge. This isn't where he's supposed to be going, even if it is where it had all started. This was just the beginning, not the end. He carries on until the familiar building comes into view. An ache settles in his chest as he stares up at the condemned building through a wire construction fence that keeps the public out of the area. He sourly remembers slipping through this very fence after fleeing the rooftop that day, hard in his stomach as the gravity of All Might's words blurred his head. Can someone without a quirk become a hero like you? You need to be realistic, kid. A danger sign clings to the fence, raising caution about unstable buildings and the risk of ignoring the warning, but Izuku pays it no mind as he scales the fence using One for All. He drops gracefully on the other side, sucking in a breath to calm his nerves as he continues forth towards the heart of the site, the tallest building remaining. The whole neighborhood is totaled. He knows exactly what had happened in his own reality. He hadn't really had a chance to take the place in when he was fleeing that day, hopes and dreams and what felt like his entire life crumbling down around him. He just wanted to leave that day. Now, he takes a moment to look. He'd only seen the damage from the outside after it had happened just months before the sludge villain incident. Looking in, from the outside of the fence, safe on the other side from the chaos as heroes and rescue services searched for survivors in the wreckage. It was swiftly sanctioned off and deemed dangerous by the commission after that, left to rot. It had been a villain fight that had wreaked havoc on the unsuspecting neighborhood. It was apartment buildings mainly, the land and buildings owned by a private landlord who'd gone bankrupt following the destruction and had been forced to sell the land. Izuku remembers seeing it on the news. There was so much structural damage that the entire place was condemned and just left. The commission wasn't about to pour money into rebuilding, especially if there was no gain for them, even if they should have. And Izuku knows the city of Musutafu just didn't have the funds for such a project, and even insurance was fickle when it came to villain fights, so it had sat untouched. It's unfortunate, really, that it just sits in limbo like an abandoned ghost town. He knows the place will remain that way until some aspiring entrepreneur with the funds and time purchases the land and rebuilds all the homes lost, or puts in something new. Musutafu's small, though, so it's rather unlikely. A year's a long time for such a chunk of land to sit on the market, and he's sure it'll remain that way for ages. It's been due for demolition in his own reality for months, but it hasn't happened yet, always getting postponed and rescheduled. Izuku chews at his bottom lip as he creeps through the wreckage, silently determining that this exact neighborhood had probably received the same treatment as his own back home. He hadn't come back around since All Might, and it's probably for the best. The building he's looking for is the most stable, which is probably why All Might had chosen it in the first place. Isolated and private, and sturdy enough to support them. The damage is minimal, a wall busted out, but that said, it's probably not entirely structurally sound either. Still, Izuku glances at the broken wall, a way in, before deciding to just use One for All and scale his way to the top. It seems easier that way. He also doesn't completely trust that there's not a trap waiting for him in the stairwell. 10 floors is a lot of chances for an ambush. He sucks in a breath and does just that, springing up with a quirk-enhanced leap and using window ledges, half-crumpled balconies, and crooked fire escapes to make his way to the top. Nothing moves or shifts under him, so he decides it's probably still stable enough to support him. He grips the edge of the roof when he's close enough and digs the toe of his shoe into a vent duct. Hoisting himself up and stumbling over the edge, this time he lands a little less gracefully. He feels a weird wave of déjà vu as he glances around, a frown tugging at his lips. The rooftop doesn't look much different than the one from his own memories. He isn't sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Izuku hesitates before inching away from the safety of the edge. It doesn't look like Deku has arrived yet, so he has a second to compose himself. That was really something. A scarily familiar voice calls lightly, and Izuku can't help how his heart thumps against his ribcage and he swirls to face the direction the call had come from. I knew you were different from me, but seeing it... impressive. You must be Deku. Izuku prides himself at how calm and even his voice comes out. The teen that emerges from the shadows is Izuku's height. Probably exactly his height. He's slimmer, though, and lankier. None of the muscle mass that Izuku had needed to be able to accept One for All from All Might. He supposes Deku would have never needed to work out like he had. Deku looks different, but the same. It's easy to tell that's exactly who he's looking at. It's like looking in a mirror. It's like looking in a mirror, but perhaps it's one of those distorting mirrors at carnivals and fairs. Izuku sees himself and the other teen, but not the same. His facial structure is the same. His hair the same foresty green curls, just a bit longer, maybe. Deku's eyes are the same, that bright emerald green his mother used to always gush about, while hugging him close when he was a child. They're even dressed completely different. Izuku's in a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt, casual, whereas Deku is more dressed up. He wears a white button-up shirt and a dark-colored waistcoat. The slacks he wears are as dark as the waistcoat, and the tie tucked neatly into the vest is the same red as the familiar sneakers on his feet. He looks a lot different from the teen that had deliberately ran into him yesterday. Overall, they look so similar. Yet, focusing on the details, Deku looks different, too. His eyes don't hold the same brightness, and there's heavy bags under them that could rival Aizawa-sensei's. His face lacks fullness, cheeks almost hollow. Not even a trace of the baby fat Izuku still has. Deku looks almost unwell, in an exhausted sort of way. He can even spot Deku's arms, where the sleeves of the dress shirt are rolled up to his elbows despite the late-morning chill, clear of the scars that had come from One for All. How could you tell? His doppelganger asks, tearing Izuku from his thoughts, voice dripping with sarcasm as he continues out from behind a blind spot, behind the air-conditioning unit. Izuku scrunches his nose up at his own stupidity, glad Sensei isn't here to reprimand him for his carelessness. He'd been too quick to assume Deku wasn't there yet, that he wasn't waiting and watching from the shadows. Deku pauses on the edge when he's close enough to Izuku that they don't have to shout to be heard. Head quirking and eyes lazily scanning Izuku up and down. Was it the green hair, or the eyes that gave me away, or perhaps the identical face? Izuku narrows his eyes on the other teen, keeping his mouth in a straight line. He sucks in a light breath through his nose before tensing his stance. You wanted to meet me, Izuku says. Well, I'm here. You are. Deku studies him uncertainly, before subtly looking around like he's expecting Sensei to spring up from the shadows and tie him up in a capture weapon, or for All Might to rise up from the floor and capture him. And where's your entourage, I heard Eraserhead is quite taken with you. I saw it. So, how long until he comes for me? At this point, you're more dangerous to me than I am to you. He doesn't know where I am, Izuku admits pointedly, only slightly regretting admitting that when Deku looks surprised. I figured you might not appreciate me showing up with a team of people wanting you imprisoned. I'm not scared of you, Deku, and you're no match for me. Now what about you? Shigaraki and the League on the way to kidnap me? No, Deku snorts, brushing his fingers through the weathered grime on the edge he sat on. If I wanted you kidnapped, I would have ratted you out at the beach yesterday. Letting Eraserhead see me was a risk. You and Eraserhead were just so in your own little world, you didn't even notice me. Easy targets. Shigaraki could have easily overthrown the two of you, and he would have, if he knew. How long were you there? Izuku demands, shoulders squaring up. There's a pit of fear settling in his stomach as he thinks about that. He'd already come to this conclusion that they could have been ambushed on the beach if Deku wanted him captured, but hearing the confirmation, the possibility of that ambush being a real thought coming from Deku, he feels sick. Shigaraki has a weird fascination with Sensei. They would have been caught, vulnerable and unassuming, and been easily outnumbered by the League. After Kacchan's kidnapping, Izuku knows Shigaraki has numbers and power, strong quirks, a team. Long enough. Deku waves him off casually in reply, the confidence and laid-back nature coming from the doppelganger, rubbing at Izuku in a way that has him gritting his teeth. Now, why should I trust your word, hero? I trusted you enough to come here, Izuku reminds sharply. And I could ask you the same question. Trust goes both ways. Besides, if the heroes knew you were here, Do you really think they'd let me, a foreign student, head the mission? They wouldn't waste the time on chit-chat, Deku. I guess you've got a point. Deku hums thoughtfully, clearly dissecting Izuku's words. I doubt a racer would have let you go 3 feet without a chaperone. And you did trust me, you're here, aren't you? I suppose the street does go both ways. I won't attack if you don't. Neutral ground. Fair? Deku considers this before bowing his head in one sharp nod. Fair. So, if you didn't want me kidnapped, Izuku mutters first when Deku doesn't start, even though he is the one who arranged this meeting, then what do you want from me? Why reach out, especially when Eraserhead was right there? I wanted to know what's so special about you. Deku breathes out testily, scanning Izuku up and down before he finally shifts and sinks to a sitting position, expression pensive. Izuku's heart stutters in his chest as Deku carelessly plops down on the edge of a 10-story building. He wonders if this is what Aizawa-sensei, the other teachers, and his mom feel like when he does something reckless and dangerous. There's nothing special about me. Izuku frowns when the words finally catch up to him, tense stance easing slightly in confusion. I was just given a chance to help people, and I took it. Bullshit! Deku snarls, leaning forwards as he digs his nails into the metal of the ledge. A chance to help people? That's bullshit. I just watched you scale a 10-story building. I watched you use a quirk we shouldn't have. A change of reality wouldn't magically give you something we weren't born with. We're the same person and I don't have one. I'm quirkless, and if I'm quirkless, you're quirkless, so tell me, Midori Izuku, how is it you have something I never did? I don't owe you anything, Izuku snaps back, half regretting giving Deku a chance. You're not entitled to know anything about me. I don't owe you an explanation. I don't owe you an answer. It doesn't make sense, Deku hisses, hands closing into fists that clench hard enough that his knuckles blanch. All at once the anger leaves the other teen. His fists unclench, and color pulls back into his hands. Why were you given something I wasn't? What did I do wrong? The question catches Izuku off guard, but the answer itself is easy. You decided to hurt people instead of helping them, Izuku huffs unkindly, letting some of his own tension drain away now that Deku's lost some of his own hostility. For a long second, Deku just stares at him. His eyes are narrowed in on Izuku and searching intently from afar. His form is slumped over in exhaustion, or maybe even detachment. Izuku doesn't think anyone has ever studied him as intently, as searchingly. Izuku sees the exhaustion he'd spotted a glimpse at earlier, clear and unhidden now as Deku squints at him as if trying to understand the person before him. And how did you help people? Deku finally asks, head quirking to the side. Izuku's grateful the other boy doesn't move, that he'd settled down and stayed there. How did you decide to help? Deku's voice is carefully clipped, emotionless. Why did you decide to help after everything? That note was a gamble, something you need to know to figure out, but you knew exactly what it meant. You figured it out, followed it here. You asked him the same question on this exact rooftop, didn't you? Did you get the same answer? I did. Izuku bites at the inside of his cheek. He said no. But you're a hero, Deku points out, eyes narrowing once again. He stares like he thinks Izuku is lying, prying gaze digging right into Izuku's entire being. He told you no, too. He left you here, just like me. How did you help people? How are you different from me? I didn't let All Might's words stop me. Izuku rubs at the back of his neck, unable to shake the feeling of how exposed Deku makes him feel. That day, even after everything, I did what no one else was doing. I helped Kachan when the heroes wouldn't. I moved before I thought, and I helped him. I rushed into danger with the sole intention of helping someone in need. My potential to help was recognized by someone important. That was the same day, Deku mutters, eyes slivering as he scans Izuku. I heard that attack, the sirens and stuff. I could sort of see it from here too, just barely. But you didn't bother trying to help him, Izuku snaps, glaring at the other. Something else must have changed here before this, because Izuku knows he could never imagine hearing commotion like that and doing nothing. Maybe you're exactly where you belong then, Deku. Deku looks affronted by this, mouth settling flat in an annoyed grimace of sorts. He pointedly looks away from Izuku, gaze settling in on the afternoon sky. He's silent, annoyingly so. Izuku turns his own attention away too, swallowing down his own frustration as he has his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He can't leave it there, though. He didn't put his safety on the line today for this to end like this. There's obviously more to this. There's more to it, and Izuku doesn't understand. Deku wanted to know what makes them different. Izuku will tell him. Kachan could have died, you know. He scoffs in the other's direction, tone icy and accusing. We almost died facing that sludge guy. Because you weren't there, he almost did die. You just watched from up here? Ignored it? Why didn't you leave? You ignored him when you could have helped. I helped. Why didn't you help him? He's an asshole, but he's Kachan still. Leave? Deku echoes faintly, an upward, humored lilt to his voice. Izuku turns to see his double sporting a half smile. But there's something almost defeated about it. Izuku's stomach twists uncomfortably as that sinks in. Why didn't I, huh? Tell me then. How'd you get down? Izuku glares sharply at the other's amusement, gesturing back to the door in exasperation. Of course, Deku would be fooling around now, asking stupid questions and playing dumb. Kachan had told him Deku was an asshole. The annoyance settles tenfold in Izuku's stomach as Deku calmly follows his gesture, only his eyes flicking towards the door nestled between two AC units. Deku stares at the door for a long second before his eyes flick back to Izuku, and then that half-smile from before widens as he cocks his head almost teasingly to the side. Of course. Deku nods, voice low and condescending, like how someone would talk to a small child. He doesn't take his eyes off of Izuku as he speaks. The door. Obviously. Be my guest. Leave. I won't try anything, so don't look so scared. I won't move a muscle. Leave. Go on. Deku shifts his body so it's more angled towards the doorway and AC units, chin nodding towards the door in clear invitation for Izuku to do as suggested before dropping back onto his kneecap. Izuku glances back at the door again, suddenly unsure. It's just a door he knows. It's the exact same one Izuku remembers leaving through when All Might had left him on this very rooftop more than a year ago, in a different reality entirely. He studies the door suspiciously before turning back to the other teen, scanning Deku just as he had the door. To leave through the door, he has to get awfully close to Deku, but he isn't really afraid of the Midori Izuku of this reality. Not like everyone else. He knows he could hold his own fairly well against someone like Shigaraki, so taking Deku down, should need be, wouldn't be too hard. They have very different physiques, and obviously different skill sets if Deku works in the shadows while Izuku is a hero student. Plus, danger sense still isn't going off, so there's that going for him. But he knows he should still be careful. He'd promised Kachan after all. Despite Izuku's eyes on him, the other teen doesn't seem concerned. He just repositions himself where he sat on the edge of the rooftop, one knee pulled up to his chest, and dark curls falling into his eyes. He's half-turned in Izuku's direction, and Izuku feels his gaze on him, knows the other is watching intently as he finally forces himself into action and beelines to the door. He sets his hand on the knob and draws in a breath, expecting something, a trap or something maybe, as he turns the handle and nothing happens. It doesn't even turn. Izuku's hand tightens on the metal handle, giving it another sharp turn, even channeling One for All faintly to get the job done, but it's locked. Whole lock's busted, Deku tells him, uninterested, or seemingly uninterested. His voice hitches in a way Izuku knows his own voice does too, and for some reason guilt pulls in his chest. This side of the handle doesn't even turn. I should know. I tried for hours. And inside you've got to yank on the handle and kick the door in. Or it's useless too. Also took ages to figure out. Izuku stares at the door in disbelief. It's locked. It was locked that day with All Might. That's why you couldn't go down. I could not, Deku agrees, features hardening as he abruptly turns away, chin settling on his knee as he stares out over the distant city. You know, this place is condemned, barely even stable. The whole block is. I'm sure you saw it coming in. We both know a strong gust of wind could knock this place down. And it was just the same last year when All Might left me here. Izuku swallows, glaring hard at the back of the locked rooftop access door. His hand tightens on the handle, gives another useless jiggle before pulling away and dropping weightlessly to his side. It was locked. Izuku's door hadn't been locked. He'd been able to pull it open and leave, sneak out of the construction site, and be almost a full block away when he heard the commotion of the second attack. He helped because he could, because he was able to. Something was different here, but it wasn't anything like Izuku was thinking. Anything could have happened to the lock and door, as minuscule as it was. Something small, hardly noticeable, that wouldn't really be noticed from reality to reality. A previous tenant in the building breaking the lock by accident, or the elements seeping into the locking mechanism. Maybe it was jammed ages ago, and the building maintenance hadn't gotten around to fixing it. Anything could have happened, something so small you wouldn't even think about it. Small but significant, in the grand scheme of things. Izuku's door had been unlocked. Deku's hadn't. How? Izuku swallows, unable to force the rest of the words out. It's a good thing. Deku is him. He understands what he means even without finishing. He doesn't think he'd even be able to force the question out, not while he's struggling to imagine being stuck up here for an indefinite amount of time. 2 days, Deku tells him, clearly putting in the effort to keep his gaze on anything besides Izuku. His fingers tossle with the laces on his sneakers, slipping into the loops of the knot before pulling away and clutching at the toe of the sneaker like he's grounding himself. Well, 2 nights, 3 days, technically. I was rescued on the 3rd day. Why didn't you? What was I supposed to do? Deku snaps hotly, turning sharply to glare at Izuku. My phone was dead. I could yell myself hoarse all I wanted, but who would even hear me from up here? I didn't have your fancy quirk to use. It was pointless. Deku turns away again, shifting a bit as his body language closes off. Izuku sees the glare on the other's face, but he's just glad it's not directed at him. I hoped a hero would come. They always save you, right? That's what heroes do. I know some of them patrol these areas, but no one came. No one helped me. Izuku chokes on a breath, staring glassy-eyed at his doppelganger. Deku watches Izuku for a long second, shoulders still squared like he's waiting to see what Izuku will do with the information. Deku takes a slow breath after a moment when the silence lingers for a long second, before slumping down as his shoulders bow in on themselves. Izuku opens his mouth to reply, but nothing comes out. He can't seem to form any words, and he doesn't even think anything he would say would mean anything to Deku right now, so he shuts his mouth and remains silent. Deku turns his head, settling his cheek on the knee still pulled up to his chest as he stares out at the open sky, refusing to look back at Izuku. I was going to jump. The admission is soft, but honest. Izuku still startles, sucking in a breath. He knows he'd considered the same thing, back when All Might had left him here, just for a second. But to hear someone, himself, admit it so seriously, it's hard to swallow. Deku doesn't even sound any different or shift at all, despite the gravity of his words. The other teen deflates even further into himself, which Izuku hadn't thought was possible. He's quiet for another long second, still refusing to look back at Izuku. Finally, Deku continues. I figured I was going to die anyways, so why bother trying? Why not take matters into my own hands? I mean, even if I did survive being stuck up here, you know the quirkless statistics just as well as I do. That's not a life someone wants to live. Not here in Japan as a minority. It doesn't get better for us. Izuku palms at his eyes, inching closer to Deku. If the other boy is scared or surprised by the movement, he doesn't let it show. Izuku watches the other teen cautiously, hunching in on himself as Deku lulls his attention back in Izuku's direction. Izuku doesn't think either of them honestly trust the other, but there is a certain level of mutual trust. Deku sighs softly to himself before carrying on. I always thought I could have been a hero. I clung to that, and I bet you did too. Through it all, that's what I hung on to. When kids were cruel at school, when those stupid spider lilies were left on my desk, when Bakugo told me to jump. I didn't let it hurt me because I believed. It was just stepping stones. Nothing comes easy, and I thought, despite it all, I could have become a quirkless hero, that these hardships were just hurdles to jump, that All Might would lie to me and let me cling to a childhood dream, just a little longer, even if he didn't mean it. Izuku sucks in a stuttery breath as he eases up onto the edge of the building beside Deku. He can't stand the distance between them now, not when they're talking about jumping off this very building. Izuku knows Deku is just sharing his story, but the talk of suicide has him on edge. Deku quirks his head, now looking a little uncertain about the proximity. It's the first time in a while the other has even looked at Izuku. The shifting must have caught his attention or something. He stares silently, scrutinizing Izuku for a moment before tearing his gaze away from Izuku again. Izuku takes that as permission to settle by Deku. He shifts until he's sitting similarly to the other teen, both knees clutched to his chest. He squeezes his arms around his knees, setting his chin in the gap between them, intent to hear his doppelganger out. I had a lot of time to think, Deku mutters into his knee, no longer needing to project to be heard. 3 days is a long time. I had no food, no water, no bathroom. It got so cold at night, and I wondered, where are the heroes? Why isn't anyone coming for me? Is anyone even looking? Why did it seem like everyone was getting rescued except for me? All my life I believed heroes would be there when I needed them, but they weren't. They wouldn't. Izuku ignores how rough his own voice sounds. How would they know you were here? I considered that too, Deku promises dryly, and Izuku can tell he's squeezing his eyes shut, even if Deku is facing away. I'm not a starstruck little kid anymore. Obviously they wouldn't know. They're heroes, not wizards. It wasn't until I was rescued that I realized. Deku swallows, glaring down at the ground before he shifts the topic. Look, I thought it was a mistake. No one could find me, that's all. That's why I suffered up there for so long without any help. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Izuku swallows, mouth dry as he squeaks out. But... Deku stiffens, glancing over, only to look away just as fast. But then I realized no one was even looking. A heavy silence settles over them. It's so heavy and suffocating that Izuku finds it hard to breathe. Deku still isn't looking over at him, and there's no shift in his body language as he lets the silence linger. Izuku wonders if Deku is trying to figure out how to continue, or if he just needed a break. Finally, the other glances back towards Izuku, nothing more than a quick lull of his head to catch sight of him before his eyes swiftly return to the horizon. I was missing for 2 full nights, and not once did my name or picture appear on the news, or even online. I looked. I scoured. A child was missing for 2 nights, and no one cared. I bet Mom was the only one even trying. But do you know how easy it is to ignore one person? No one cared that a quirkless kid was gone. Deku was quiet for a long second before he lets out a humorless laugh, scrubbing at his face with his hands in a way that would have made him look deranged if it weren't for what he was saying. You know when I finally made the news? When people actually took a second to think about me? Izuku shakes his head, even if he has a hunch that he desperately wishes to not be true. They cared when I was dead. Deku barks out another laugh, just as humorless as the last. He shakes his head in disbelief, offering Izuku an exhausted smile that doesn't reach his eyes. It took me dying for anyone to give a shit. A suicide report that I know was only aired out of obligation. They didn't care that I was missing, didn't bother trying to help me, but as soon as I was gone, they were all too willing to put it all behind them. It's horrible, Izuku whispers, wiping his nose against the sleeve of the sweatshirt he wears. That's society, Deku quips, voice lacking emotion. That's just how it is. Izuku is quiet for a long second, just thinking. There's nothing he can do besides think and consider everything Deku has told him so far. He said so much, answered so many questions already, but Izuku knows it's only the start. This is just the beginning of Deku's story, and that thought is unpleasant. There's nothing he can say that will make this better, that will right the wrongs. He's trying to understand this, but he hasn't gone through this. This conversation has veered down a path Izuku can no longer relate to. He'd figured out where they differed. How Deku was shattered by the world, where Izuku was uplifted and led to something better. It doesn't excuse what Deku has done, but it's explained some things. He'll never feel like Deku does. He'll never live this firsthand. They're the same person, technically, but they're so altered by their own environments, societies, experiences, and even people they've come into contact with, that they really couldn't be further from the same. It's enough to make his head spin. Izuku was rescued from the life Deku lives. Deku remains quiet as well, head angled upwards, and staring intently up at the clouds steadily filling in overhead. It's a companionable quiet, and Izuku finds he doesn't hate it. He's grateful for the second to just think and process. So far, Deku is nothing like the heartless villain everyone kept telling him about. He's sarcastic, and a bit of a jerk, maybe, but he's not what Izuku has been expecting. How? Izuku finally manages, angling his head lightly in Deku's direction. The other teen returns the gesture, glancing down and catching Izuku's eye as he waits for him to continue. How did you get down? What? Deku snaps lightly, voice holding no heat as he stares out into the sky. You want my entire life story or something? I know your entire life story already. Izuku clicks his tongue in mirroring annoyance. I want to know what happened to you. Deku turns slightly, studying Izuku. After a long second he shifts, legs now both hanging off the edge with his hands intertwined in his lap. He breathes out a sigh through his nose. Dabi found me, Deku admits quietly. I was going to jump. I was stood on the edge, shoes beside me. I'd even written a note. I couldn't just leave Mom with nothing, you know. If I was going to die anyways, I thought I might as well make it everyone's problem, at least be found at some point. I knew then that help wasn't coming, that heroes weren't going to rescue me, and jumping seemed a lot less miserable than starving to death. Dabi? Izuku takes the name in question before the distantly familiar name clicks into place. He works for the League. He's a villain. He didn't, Deku tells him with a warning glance. Not then, at least. He wasn't a villain when we met. He was just a lost kid from a broken home. Izuku narrows his eyes, unsurprised to meet an equally as narrowed gaze when he catches Deku's eyes. Izuku studies Deku for a long second, matching his squint and reading the warning to not say anything bad. Izuku decides then that it's probably best to keep any consternation to himself at this point. Dabi is obviously someone important to Deku, and he doesn't want to say anything wrong just yet, not when Deku is actually explaining things. It's Deku's story to tell, and he's just the audience. He used to stay around here before the League. This is a quiet, isolated place to stay when you've got nowhere else to be. He was smoking in the other building, and he looked up. He saw me, and he just stared at me. Made me feel like an idiot, honestly. When he finished his cigarette, he just kinda yelled up to me. Only idiots let others win like this, is what he said. Deku pauses, smiles bashfully, before adding, Then he told me, if I did jump, that I should at least do a flip. I was so stunned I stepped down. Izuku frowns at that, but Deku just seems amused by it. Maybe it's funnier looking back on it. Izuku doesn't see the humor in a suicide joke, while his doppelganger was seriously considering ending it all, but he supposes Dabi is a villain no matter what Deku says. At least he'd help Deku in the end. Deku clears his throat, continuing. After that, he walked up 10 stories for me and fought with that stupid lock for over an hour. When I was free, he brought me down to the ground and took me out to get food. This random, scary dude did more for me than any of the heroes. Izuku nods, processing everything. It's a lot to think about. I told him I was quirkless. Deku tells Izuku next, offhandedly. He just cocked an eyebrow and sipped at his coffee. He talked with me, you know, for hours. For hours he sat with an emotionally broken, unstable, quirkless kid. I told him everything. And he listened. Deku smiles down at his shoes, almost reminiscent. Izuku can't find the words to say anything. What are you even supposed to say? Luckily, Deku continues. I thought for a long time that day. Dabi just sat with me. I thought about going home. I wanted to see Mom. I thought about trying to continue as if everything was normal, as if I hadn't suffered for days, and the heroes just let it happen. As if All Might hadn't shattered the only dream that was keeping me going. The more I thought, the more I realized. Deku draws in a shaky breath, adamantly shaking his head before he glances over at Izuku. I couldn't, he admits quietly. I wasn't the same. You can't just bounce back from this, you know? Before, I tried to see the best in everything, but everything just kept letting me down. Everyone did. The world, society, the universe, heroes, my supposed friends. So, you faked your own suicide. Izuku knows this already. He'd come to that conclusion himself. Katan had already explained this. It was Dabi's idea. Deku huffs out fondly, smile wavering before pressing into a straight line. He told me my life was fucked, and subconsciously I already knew that, even if I chose not to believe it. He told me that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, people wouldn't change. Deep down I already knew that too. My talk with All Might just cemented it. My hero wrote me off too. Izuku chews at his bottom lip. tightening his grip on his knees. So you've just been alone? Oh, no. Deku shakes his head. I never would have survived on my own. Dabi took me in. And I say that on loose terms. He didn't really have a place to stay. He was living around here, well, going between a couple of different places, but he said he'd look after me. He comes from a bad home. His dad was super abusive. He never told me much, but you can just tell, you know? It's hard to imagine, Izuku finally voices. Deku glances over with squinted eyes, almost like he's daring Izuku not to believe him. About Dabi, I mean. He's tried to hurt my classmates. He tried to burn my sensei. Doesn't really sound like the guy you're talking about. Look, Dabi has done some shitty things, we all have, but that doesn't mean he's some heartless monster. He was the first person to not care that I didn't have a quirk. He called us misfits, both of us. He put me and himself on the same level. I'd never been given courtesy like that. He might be a villain, but that doesn't mean he's a monster. Izuku takes a second to process that. He'd known, distantly, that they don't know why villains are villains. They don't really care past getting them off the streets and ensuring public safety, which is very important. All the law and those who uphold it know is that villains do bad things, and that they should be put away so that they can't harm anyone else, but it feels like the whys are always brushed over. Very little is done without cause or reason. That's becoming clearer by the second. You know, Deku hums out softly, no one is born broken. People break us. I don't know a lot of villains, but I know the ones I have met. A lot of them have had it rough before turning to this. Turning to others who are broken too. It's easy to find comfort in people who are just like you. You had comfort, Izuku says without really thinking. He bites his lip hard when Deku looks over at him. Features bordering between suspicious and curious of what Izuku has to say. Deku doesn't speak, so Izuku draws in a breath, unable to stop now that he has Deku's attention. What about Mom? He doesn't mean for it to come out as demanding as it does. He just can't help it. His mother is the one person who'd always been there, always struggled alongside him. He's what he is today because he's had his mom's support. She was with him through everything, even when she didn't entirely believe he could achieve his goals. His heart aches as he thinks about his mom in this reality, after losing her son. He thinks about how Kachan described her, how his childhood friend had shared her grief and pain, and Izuku feels angry at Deku for doing that to her. Does Deku not feel remorse? Does he not care? Izuku loves his mom more than anything. She loves you, and you left her. You made her think you were dead. I did what needed to be done, Deku said sharply, whipping around to glare daggers at Izuku. The sharpness bleeds away, and then Deku just looks tired and mournful. His expression wavers at just the thought of his mom. I was not the little boy she sent to school that morning. I'll never be that little boy again, and I couldn't pretend to be. Deku sighs, heavy and defeated, running anxious fingers through his curls. I love Mom. I love her so much. She deserves so much better, I know that. I know it's fucked up, but she deserved a world where she didn't have to watch her son struggle for everything that everyone else takes for granted. Where she doesn't have to suffer along with me. Where she doesn't have to watch how society treats people like me. I love her, and I know she loves me. But I couldn't be the little boy she needed, not anymore. Not after everything. Izuku watches Deku, even as the other boy refuses to look over. He turns Deku's words over in his head, and really considers them. It makes sense in some gruesome way. Maybe it was because Izuku grew up the same way as Deku that he could understand where he's coming from. Izuku had always known he'd be the odd one out growing up, even when he finally reached adulthood. He'd known, even from a young age, that he'd always end up with a short straw in life just because he was a little bit different. Society sets a mold in front of you, and if you couldn't conform, it left you to struggle. Life was cruel in a minority, and Izuku knew from a young age he'd never be like everyone else. That had changed when he got One for All, when he suddenly fit the mold that society insisted upon, but Deku hadn't been as lucky. He could have just as easily ended up as Deku, struggling, and doomed to a life others decided was better suited for him, even if it meant jeopardizing his own happiness. It was a truth Izuku refused to believe throughout his life, whenever anyone would look surprised when he'd tell them he was going to be a hero, or when they suggested something less dangerous simply because he didn't have a quirk. I didn't deserve it either, Deku whispers so softly Izuku has to strain to hear it. I needed a fresh start. I needed people who didn't torment me for something I couldn't change about myself. I needed freedom that I never would have gotten in school, or as an adult. I hate that me leaving hurt her, but I did what was best. I only hurt her once this way. I didn't know what I'd become, and I wouldn't be proud to tell her now. Izuku nods, slowly but understanding. Izuku swallows, staring down at his shoes. I get it. Izuku really can't answer if he'd do the same thing or not. Doesn't know if he could stomach hurting his mom like this, but he also knows that he'd much rather only hurt her once, make her think he was dead, than to hurt her by having her know he'd become someone who hurts people. He can either preserve the memory of her little boy for her, or he can make her watch her little boy become a villain. Deku lets out a surprised noise, lulling his attention in Izuku's direction. Maybe there's hope for you to be a good hero, then. Empathy is something a lot of heroes lack. So I didn't think you'd understand. I'm also you, Izuku reminds dryly. I'm trying to understand this. Understand you. That's more than most of the people who know of me has done. Deku shrugs, like it doesn't mean anything to him, but the wetness in his eye speaks a different story. Deku is quiet again before he glances over. What are you thinking? I'm trying to figure out why you decided to jump into villainy. Izuku sighs, rubbing at his temples. Karma for lying seems to be hitting him as a headache settles in his skull. I understand why you decided against trying to be a hero, and why you decided to kill Midoriya Izuku. What made you decide to terrorize heroes? They do help people. Society would be worse without people maintaining order. I didn't decide anything, Deku frowns, looking genuinely confused. And I don't terrorize. I could care less what happens to the heroes. I give analysis, for money, plain and simple. It was an income, and honestly, if anyone just looked a little closer, they'd be able to figure it out themselves. It's not like I had some personal vendetta against heroes and searched out villains to carry out my wishes. People came to me. After the name Deku was released, people started seeking me out, offering to pay for analysis. It's a real job. It's a real job when you don't use it as a weapon. Your analysis hurts people. Izuku snaps, not quite as angry as he'd been when they first met, but angry enough that Deku doesn't seem to understand this. You ruined the symbol of peace. You got heroes hurt. You told Shigaraki how to hurt my teacher. I ruined the symbol of peace? Deku blinks owlishly, staring at Izuku. Izuku makes sure his expression doesn't waver, keeping Deku stare until Deku realizes Izuku's being serious. Is that really what they told you? Deku narrows his eyes, but for the first time since meeting him, it's not directed at Izuku. Deku lets out a sigh, unimpressed and sounding drained. Figures. You're saying that's not true, then? Izuku frowns. Well, what happened then? All Might's secret was leaked, and I know you knew. He showed me, too. Was that your way into the League? And how fast do you think you become a villain? Deku asks calmly, seriously. It wasn't a snap of my fingers and I'm suddenly some trusted member of a villain gang, and I didn't search the League out. Even if I did have the intention of leaking the secret to villains, I had no idea how to find them, and it wasn't my intention at all. I just wanted to not be a target anymore. I didn't even know the League existed until a couple months ago, when they were recruiting, and even then it was Dabi who brought us in. I told Dabi about All Might, that's it. I vented. Sue me. The #1 hero told me I couldn't be a hero, showed me how dangerous it was, then left me on a roof and I almost died because of it. I think I deserved to vent a little. They knew your name, Izuku reminds, squinting at the other boy. You know what? I'm actually not even surprised. I guess this explains why they suddenly classify me as some stupid supervillain. Deku shakes his head, frowning. Answer me this. You made a strange guy who talks you down from suicide. Well, sorta. He's a little scary, scarred up and obviously not from the best crowds. Are you telling him your real name right off the hop? Izuku hesitates, shaking his head mutely. Exactly. I introduced myself as Deku. Everyone already called me it anyways, so it wasn't a big deal. I told Dabi about All Might. He must have told somebody else. Trust me. I was just as surprised as everyone else when that fight went down. A lot of people ate All Might. So it was probably valuable info. I watched the news. I didn't even know the guy arrested for spilling the beans. You've done more than just that, though, Izuku scoffs. What about all the heroes you've hurt? All the heroes you've analyzed, all the lives your analysis has jeopardized. You hurt people. You're a villain. God, you heroes just have such a narrow point of view. Deku tuts, mouth pressed in a straight line and head lolled back as he stares up at the clouded-over sky. It looks like it's going to rain. There isn't just villains, and there isn't just heroes. The world isn't so black and white. Izuku shifts beside Deku, glancing over but not speaking. He is surprised to find the other teen's gaze, just waiting to make eye contact. Deku arches an eyebrow, like he's expecting Izuku to disagree, but Izuku's just curious where Deku is going with this. They're from different worlds, not just realities, but worlds, hero and villain. He's got a sheltered hero's view, whereas Deku sees things differently, maybe even more accurately. It's worth consideration. It might even make him a better hero if he understands more. Villains aren't inherently evil, and I hate to break it to you, but heroes aren't saints. Deku continues, voice nothing but a thoughtful mutter. What you view as evil and villainous is, more often than you'd think, just people trying to survive. You'd think I wanted this? You think I wanted to work with villains? You think I wanted to be an outcast? Do you think I would have chosen this if I could have been like you? You think I want to work against heroes when I spent my childhood idolizing them? Deku shakes his head as if answering his own questions. I'm not on anyone's side, Midoriya. I'm just trying to survive however I can. And if that means selling some analysis or jumping through Shigaraki's hoops to stay on his good side, well, I don't exactly have a lot of options now, do I? At this point, I'm dead if I disobey Shigaraki, and I'll be sent to Tartarus for life if I go to the heroes. You've hurt people, Izuku repeats, looking away from Deku, hiding his torn expression from the other teen. You hurt my teachers. And you've hurt so many heroes. You're a wanted villain. I was arrested just because I look like you. How can you just accept that? I'm not proud of it. Deku frowns. I can't help what the world thinks of me. I can't help speculation. I can't help others using my name as a scapegoat. Society sees what it wants to see, what the media and the police and the heroes say. The police operate on hearsay, Midoriya. You think they've ever gotten any actual statements from me? That they've ever even came into contact with me before the USJ? They know what others have told them, and they believe whatever suits them. I don't stand a chance against that. You want me to believe that you haven't done everything they're saying you have? I'll admit to what I have done, Deku shrugs. I'm not innocent. Far from it. I've done analysis for shady people. I'm an accomplice to more than I'd care to admit. I never claimed to be innocent. Just remember it's easy to put the blame on a name that's already known if it means easing your own punishment. I don't know half the people who claim I helped them take out a hero. I don't know if I believe you, Izuku mutters. What he knows of the whole world has been shifted upside down. Deku is bad, but what if he's not as bad as they think he is? I didn't ask you to, Deku snarks back. You wanted to know what happened, and I'm telling you, I had no intention of being a villain when I left Midori Izuku on that bridge. I had no intention of forcing All Might into an early retirement with nothing but words. I'm aware what I do is bad, and I know I work with villains. I never said I wasn't immoral. What about Kachan? Izuku questions sharply. You got him kidnapped. He said you got him kidnapped because you thought you could make him a villain too. Does that sound like someone having no intention of being a villain? He was going to take one of the many ways, Deku offers, rubbing at his eyes in exhaustion. He sounds so tired. I knew Bakugo was too headstrong to take Shigaraki up on his offer. He's wanted to be a hero just as long as I have. That's why I suggested him. I don't know the other hero students, and I don't know who could have possibly been convinced. Plus, I knew if it was me asking and riling up, he'd snap, and he did. I tried to help that time. I knew there would be people looking for him. He'd get rescued. Izuku opens his mouth to respond, but finds he can't think of anything to say. Well, it's not a good plan, but Kachan is too headstrong to submit to someone like Shigaraki. Izuku had known, too, that Kachan wouldn't agree. He'd frankly thought it was a stupid risk even trying. Definitely more work than it was worth. What about Sensei and the USJ? Izuku switches topics. Are you telling me there was some grand plan there, too? No, just another hoop, Deku tells him offhandedly. I did what was asked of me, and then I left. Shigaraki wanted an analysis. He hates losing. That's all I was there for. And that's all I did. Eraser, I just happened to be the hero challenging him. You got him hurt! You could have gotten him killed! He almost died! Izuku's fist balls up in his lap as emotion takes over. He forces the wave of one for all back down as he swallows down the emotion. I gave him easy info, Deku snaps back. He wanted something to help take out Eraserhead. Well, I told him his hair floats when he uses his quirk. Anyone with half a brain cell and eyes could have seen his hair levitating. Shigaraki could have figured that out himself if he weren't so lazy and depended on my analysis. I could have gotten Eraserhead killed. I could have forced him into retirement. I gave Shigaraki an analysis, but that doesn't mean it was a good one. What does that mean? Izuku demands calmly, glaring at Deku. Just the talk of Aizawa-sensei being a target is making him uncomfortable. That means I could have told Shigaraki about his dry eye problem. Deku snaps, counting each weakness he lists off on his fingers. I could have told him to wait Eraserhead out, that his quirk usage dwindles the more he uses it. The longer he goes, the shorter the intervals. He can keep his eyes open without blinking are. I could have told Shigaraki to form a mutant team, or told him that Eraserhead's goggles are just a deception so you can't see where he's looking, and not protective in the slightest. I could have completely sold that man out. Izuku lets out a disbelieving laugh. How can you just admit to that so easily? We're talking about someone's life. How can you so casually talk about ruining it, about ending it? This is my teacher's life. Eraserhead is one of the good ones. I know. Deku growls out in offense. Why do you think I protected him? I knew of him before. That analysis just now is years old. I always thought he was cool. Do you think I wanted to hurt him? I did as I was asked, but that doesn't mean I did it well. You protected him? Izuku's mouth has gone dry. Not well, Deku retorts half-heartedly, looking sideways away from Izuku. But it could have been worse. I don't have it out for anyone. You should see that by now. What I've done to survive, to feed myself, to put a roof over my head. I don't believe in heroes, but I don't have anything against them. But you work with Shigaraki. Doesn't mean I have the same beliefs as him. It's not that deep. He offered a place to stay if we joined his team. And beggars can't be choosers. It's a lot nicer than dumps like this place. That doesn't make it right, Izuku snaps heatedly. Deku lifts one shoulder in a shrug. I'd rather survive than be right. Izuku sputters at that. He opens his mouth to retort, but just ends up snapping a shot in defeat, pointedly looking away from the other teen. Even without looking at Deku, he can feel the other's prying gaze on him. He's getting tired of Deku prying into him. He's almost thankful he'd put his own analysis on the back burner when he started school. I know what I do is bad, Deku finally admits, voice nothing but a whisper. I don't ask questions when I give analysis, because I don't want to know what it's used for. I hate seeing the news, but I watch it anyways. I don't regret what I've done. I don't regret finding a way to survive when the universe turned its back on me, but I mourn the fact that I needed to do it. Izuku is quiet for a long second. I'm sorry you felt like you had to do it. Deku turns to him in surprise, then offers him a light half-smile. It's barely anything more than an upward curl of his lips, but it's so different from the sarcastic and defeated grins he'd gotten thus far. That upset Izuku more than it probably should. I think you'll do just fine as a hero, Deku tells him, turning his eyes back to the sky. Izuku follows suit, surprised to find the sky darkening. He wonders how long he's been here with Deku. It's late enough now that he's sure classes are out, and he has a bad feeling Aizawa-sensei is worried. It's getting late. Deku is the one to break the silence. Any other pressing questions? Well, Izuku bites his lip. Maybe one. All right. Shoot. What about the hero killer? Izuku asks, thinking back to his conversation with Ida. A friend of mine had a run-in with him. He said people suspected you were working with him. A serial killer is a lot different from the League. Stain? Deku hums thoughtfully. Friend of yours, huh? Oh, wait, you must mean Ingenium's little brother. I saw that on the news as well. Look, I don't know him well, met him once, when Shigaraki was still recruiting. We talked a bit about society and about heroes. I don't disagree with him, but killing heroes seemed like a bit much. I just told him to be careful, especially if he met any students. Killing heroes is one thing. Killing kids is a whole new level of bad. I think someone just needed to remind him that society won't get any better if you don't give people a chance to learn. He told me he wouldn't kill any kids before their career actually went pro. And he didn't, from what I heard. He hurt him still, Izuku huffs. He's still dealing with his injuries. He'll never be the same. I don't know what you want me to tell you. He's not exactly sane, and his views are gray at best, Deku snorts out. But know that he could have killed him. If your friend was hurt by Stain, then Stain deemed him fake. Didn't like what he was fighting for. It's not like I could have stopped him anyways. I know when I'm beat. I mean, have you seen his quirk? Izuku winces, nodding sourly. He's quite familiar with Stain's quirk. I see you've encountered him too, then. Deku lets out a breathy laugh, smiling knowingly at Izuku's reaction. And you live to tell the tale, too. All I know is I spoke from experience. Had an actual civil conversation with him, and he happened to take it into consideration. That's it. Izuku can't help but realize how much Deku has tried, through all the misfortune. Shigaraki launches an attack on UA, its staff, and the students, and Deku subtly withholds what could have been damning analysis about Eraserhead. Aizawa-sensei had survived because Deku half-assed his analysis, and Shigaraki was none the wiser. The League kidnaps a student, conveniently the one student with enough hard-headedness to refuse every sweet offer the League could have made. Deku had suggested Bakugo as their candidate for recruitment, and he's the only one Izuku knows, without a doubt, that they'd never be able to convince. Kacchan is too egotistical to even consider switching sides. He's got the goal of being number one in his head, and nothing short of death will deter him. The League tries to recruit the hero killer, and Deku somehow manages to talk the murderer out of harming students who haven't been given a chance to really be a hero yet. Ida may still be alive today, only because of Deku's advice. This doesn't sound like the villain everyone has been telling him about. The police operate largely on hearsay. They know what others have told them, and they believe whatever suits them. You're not what they think you are, Izuku breathes out. They think that They don't even know what you've been doing. All Might, the police, you're right. All those villains they arrested have played you up to this big, scary supervillain, but you're not. I can't help that. Deku furrows his brow, also wondering if I should take that as a compliment or be insulted. I could help you. It takes Izuku a long second to realize what he'd said, but when his brain does catch up, he can't help but think about how he could help Deku. Everyone thinks Deku is this conniving villain, and he is cunning, but he's not entirely their enemy. They've had Deku wrong this entire time. Deku is just staring at Izuku like he'd grown a second head. Are you insane? The other teen snorts out. Did you miss the part about me having a glaring target on my back? I'm sure every single hero in Japan wants me dead at this point. If I showed my face, I'd be shipped right off to Tartarus, and you know it. Like you said, you got arrested for just having the same face. They'd be stupid to ship you off right away. Izuku shakes his head. You could be an asset. We're trying to take down the League. You've got information on them. Analysis goes both ways. You could start helping heroes. They know you're good at it. You can make a plea deal, tell them the truth and offer up useful information in exchange for a lesser sentence. Help them take down the League. You're not what they think you are. And what makes you think I have any analysis on my friends? You're me, Izuku grinned sharply. And I've got analysis on my friends. You can't turn it off. I bet you have notebooks filled with leisure analysis that you've never even shown anyone. I saw those notebooks at the beach. They're just like mine. Tell me I'm wrong. Maybe you're not as dense as I thought, Deku blows out. They don't trust me. They have a lie detector quirk on hand, Izuku tells him. How do you think they verified my story? If you've been telling me the truth, they'll see exactly what I'm seeing. You're not what they think you are. They've been building you up on villain reports alone. Heroes aren't out to get you. You're not what they think you are. At best, you've been an informant this whole time, and an accomplice at worst. A plea deal will help you. I can't just switch sides, Deku scoffs, now looking a little annoyed. It doesn't work like that for people like me. I can't trust them. I shouldn't trust you. So what? Izuku grates out. You're just going to go back pretending you're some dangerous supervillain? Go back to hurting people when you have the chance to help them instead? I'm going to stay safe, Deku sighs, carding his fingers through his hair anxiously. I know what I'm getting myself into, staying with Shigaraki. You, though. You and those heroes? I've been burned before by trusting them. I don't want to live the rest of my life in prison. But I can help you, Izuku huffs in exasperation, reaching out to catch the other teen by the arm. He doesn't get very far as Deku jolts to his feet, hopping off the edge backwards before taking 2 big steps backwards before Izuku can even blink. Why are you so afraid? I never asked for help, Deku snaps in reply. Before Izuku can speak, the other teen is tugging his phone out of his pocket. I think we've chatted long enough. I should go before you arrest me. Do you even have that kind of power here? Wait, Izuku begs. I'm sorry, just trust me. A vivid portal appears, just behind Deku at nothing more than a click of the button on his phone. The other boy hesitates for just a second before sighing. Trusting in people like you is what got me into this in the first place. I hope you get back to your reality, all right? With that, he steps through. You just didn't trust the right people, Izuku shouts as the void closes abruptly. Izuku growls to himself as he buries his head between his knees and sighs. He'd been so close to helping Deku, so close to fixing what was wrong here. Damn it! He sits for a long while, eyes squeezed shut. When he finally lifts his head, the sky has transitioned from blue to a setting purplish blue. It's only then he finally forces himself to unfurl, tucking his hands into his sweatshirt pocket as he stands, trying to find the best way down. You really are an idiot, Izuku grits out, unsure if he's talking about himself or Deku. Monday. Reality. Shota grits his teeth as he hoists a little girl up into his arms. He swings across the street, repelling from a loose fire escape. The child clings around his neck, tears soaking into his capture weapon. He lands gracefully on the ground as a flash of green sweeps past him. He pays it no mind besides a quick glance backwards. Deku! A voice, Bubble Girl, Shota thinks, calls loudly, but Shota doesn't bother looking back. Midoriya isn't his priority right now. Getting this child to her family is, and getting them all evacuated safely is. We've got a kid down here. Don't engage the villain. Focus on evac. Lemillion and I have this. The attack had started late afternoon, an attack downtown. Shota had gotten the alert for it, and had decided to start patrol early so he could lend a hand. It was the biggest attack in the past couple months, probably since the Hosu attack. It was chaotic between the attack and people fleeing, so he'd gotten started on evacuating citizens while leaving the actual villain to Sir Night-Eye, who happened to be the first responder to the attack. He hears a woman frantically calling the name Aiko, and when Shota turns, he sees a woman rushing towards him. The little girl sobs hard as she squirms to be set down, but Shota keeps hold of her. When the woman finally reaches him, she grabs desperately for the child, and Shota hands the little girl off to her mother without question. When she's safely in her mother's hold, he turns away as the woman clutches the child close to her chest. He anchors his back foot, arches his hand back, and prepares to throw a strand of capture weapon and get back to work when the woman grabs onto his sleeve, making him pause. Please, she begs desperately, clutching her little girl to her body. The child is probably no older than 5. My son, Ame, he's only 4. They were together with their father. You've got to help, please. Shota thinks back to any other children he may have seen lost in the chaos. He hadn't seen any. Then he remembers that shout. Midoriya. Bubble Girl sent him to find a kid. There's no guarantee that the child Midoriya was helping is Ame, but it's the best lead he's got. I'll find him, Shota promises. Please try to stay calm. The woman sobs, but nods, hugging her daughter closer. Shota heads back the way he came. He spots Bubble Girl and Lemillion, stood in the mouth of a gaping hole in what had been a library, but doesn't see a flash of green anywhere. Maybe Midoriya got Ame out. He just had to find the kid. Deku! Shota calls loudly. Eraserhead! Shota glances over to Tokuda. Deku took the little boy and left. He headed towards the cafe to avoid the worst of the attack. Shota knows exactly what the student is talking about. He bows his head in thanks, but Tokuda is already helping with the arrest, so he heads towards the cafe across the street. He doesn't make it far. It's crying that draws in his attention. His body stiffens as he whips around to find the source, and there, alone, is a young boy who looks a lot like the little girl he'd already saved. The boy sobs, one hand fisting into his t-shirt, while the other fist rubs at teary eyes. Ame, Shota greets, hoping that knowing the boy's name will help gain his trust. He inches closer to the boy, gaze flicking around to spot a sign of Midoriya. He knows a student wouldn't leave a traumatized child alone, so where the hell is he? My name is Eraserhead, and I'm a hero. I'm going to take you to your mommy and your sister, all right? Are you hurt? The boy sniffles, shaking his head, and Shota doesn't know how he sees past the tears, but he's not about to question it. He crouches beside the boy, scanning the alley one more time for Midoriya. There's something unsettling about his absence that Shota can't put his finger on. It's very un-Midoriya. Ame, did another hero help you outside? A slow nod, bottom lip wobbling like he's about to start sobbing again. Okay. Where did he go? Gone. The boy bursts into tears once again, and it's at that moment Shota notices a strange glow coming off of the little boy's hands. He blinks his own quirk into existence, out of habit, as spotting something strange, and instantly the ominous glow of the child's hands is gone. A quirk. Fuck. Where the hell is Midoriya? All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 10 of When Realities Collide. Chapter 11 will be up next. Hope you all enjoyed this chapter. It's probably my absolute favorite one. The interaction between Deku with his other realities version of himself. I just think it's so well written, and it's just such a cool concept. I'm eager to hear your thoughts and reactions, though. Just a few more chapters to go. As I've stated, it's only 13 chapters for this fic, so we are nearing the end. And as always, thank you so much for listening.